Oh, hello everybody, I'm Cosmic Claire and welcome to another one of my evening videos. If you've seen any of my videos before, you probably know that I have an interest in local environmental concerns, and not all of them are as going as well as the rest. The situation with Sparrow Park is fairly optimistic, and you may recall I've mentioned about the problem with the paving stones that the council seem to be taking the slightest opportunity to remove. And this is an ongoing one, but one that I hobbled up to the parish hall for this evening is there's a people who live in Leeds may have heard of this. There's a Trolleybus scheme that they want to, the government is proposing to give some money to Leeds City Council to develop a Trolleybus scheme through from the northwest of Leeds to the southeast, which is kind of one of the principal axes of the city. Well, there's a lot of local people who are not keen on this happening for a number of reasons. For myself, primarily it's a mix. Well, primarily it's a mixture of two things. One is the damage to the conservation environment that we would experience here in Headingley if it happened, but also something which is kind of a bit off the map for most people, because as I've talked before, ethics has somehow been written out of equations. You're not allowed to express ethics as a concern against things like planning. But I believe there's a very serious ethical case to be answered here, and we really need to be thinking about it, not just in this case, but in a whole general approach to the world, because ethics has been written out. Aesthetics has been written out as well. Certainly anybody who knows northwest Leeds, anybody who knows Leeds, I mean, it's not merely the Headingley A660 corridor that I'm thinking about, but there's a fantastic amount of wonderful stone work, stone buildings, Victorian architecture here in Leeds, and some of it's looked after and some of it's not, and the idea to me that people from outside can come and make these major architectural changes to part of the city so that other people who want to pass through the area can do it more quickly is a complete travesty. These people are not thinking about the aesthetics, and this is, you know, I can kind of hear people saying, oh yes, but what about the public good? Well, I would argue that aesthetics is the public good, and we need to be thinking in terms of what is best for the local population. And it's absolutely fascinating how the political agenda has been so hijacked that we are told that a scheme like this has to go through, and that people must make this sacrifice in their lives, that the community must make this sacrifice for other people. The political high-ups want to do this, and they expect us to pay in the damage to our lives and our environment. And so, yet again, it's necessary for the community to tell these people who are actually just trustees of our interests that these are not our interests and we don't want them to do this. But these people are very persistent and they want to do these things to our environment. They want to do it to us. And just a moment talking about the practical side of it, I've spoken with a number of people who are kind of experts in this field, and they're pointing out that very little, if any, benefit would be achieved in terms of ferrying people through what is admittedly something of a chicane, but it's a community and it's a thoroughfare which has existed for probably 1,000 years or more, and this is not really taken into account. One of the things that I find kind of amazing about the modern world is that major structural changes take place at an ever-increasing rate. And I think that there needs to be more thought and more consideration for both these aesthetic considerations of you wouldn't think about putting a trolleybus through the heart of Venice. Now, okay, so Headingley is not Venice, but it's still an extremely well-preserved Victorian village, as there are a number of around Leeds, and I bet the people in Chapel Allerton are being grateful that they don't have such a heavy commuter route, because they have a similar kind of stone architectural conservation heritage over there. So while I remember, on the blurb beneath this video, I will put the website address of the group, which is the umbrella group, which is opposing this planning decision, which is kind of being rushed through. Even the consultation is being rushed through and being done in rather poorly organised fashion, and one can't help but wonder who is going to benefit. When there's £175 million to be spent and lots of contracts to be dispensed with, I think that we've now come to a point in this day and age. We have seen so much corruption high up in so many different places, not least of which are MPs constantly stretching their expenses, even fiddling them, dare I say, occasionally. There's always money for this kind of stuff. There's always money when it's needed, except for the people who are just living day to day. And it's interesting that some of the other comparisons about this proposed trolleybus scheme are that this is an interesting story someone told me this evening, that the MP whose constituency it goes through in Headingley, I believe his name is Greg Mulholland, and I think he's a Liberal Democrat for his sins. I thought Liberal Democrats had kind of lost credibility since May 2010, but we'll talk about that another time. And apparently he went to a city in Eastern Europe, might have been Budapest, possibly, and apparently they're saying it doesn't make any difference and that nobody else is kind of following them, and that no other cities in Britain have risked going on with this, and that it's rapidly becoming an out-of-date system which will need to be maintained from some kind of manufacturing base, but if it's the only one in the country, that's going to cost a lot in terms of low volume production. And then the list goes on and on of the way that it's going to clog up the traffic and make little or no difference to the through time of people, whether at rush hour or not. And one can't help wondering why an MP who had seen that the system in Eastern Europe was not very successful should come back and the following day shake hands with Nick Clegg and approve that this was what we wanted in Leeds. Well, as they say in political speak, I wonder, what you might think about that. You might imagine certain things, but I couldn't possibly comment. But frankly, people make a lot of money out of these schemes, and it's not too much to imagine that somewhere along the way there might possibly have been a few sweeteners, perhaps a few funny handshakes, perhaps some rewards promised down the line, who knows. But there's a lot of money to be handed out with these things, and they seem extremely keen to do it. Now, my own personal preference for this is that what was suggested in the 1920s but was considered too expensive. It's always been considered too expensive. We need an underground system here in Leeds, travelling from somewhere out near Holt Park or thereabouts, through Headingley Hyde Park and into the city and out the other side, following a similar route to the one they're proposing, but underground. And everybody shakes their heads and throws their hands up in dismay and says, oh, we can't possibly afford that, it would cost billions. The point is, it's a solution which would be permanent forever, or at least probably hundreds of years. With these things, you need to think like the Romans did. You think, okay, what is a permanent solution to this, which is not going to do any, it's not going to damage anything that we also want to save. Now, the Romans weren't averse to putting, roads through barbarian villages and stuff like that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about preserving communities which are a mixture of architecture and people woven together, and people who happen to choose to pass through them are welcome to, but people should not be expected to be put on the altar of sacrifice for other people and have their lives and their communities invaded and damaged and bulldozed. I was looking at some of the maps earlier, and there's a historic boundary wall running along the length of Headingley Lane from the top of Headingley Hill down almost to Hyde Park Corner, which apparently has been moved back. So this is and there's some old stone gate posts, conservation listed. This is this all has to, it will change the character of the area. It will make it into a kind of pastiche of what it is, and you can be sure that in that work that stone will be damaged, stone will be lost. It's a very desirable community. It's a very desirable resource, and these are just these changes are just trying to be foisted on people so that their aesthetic environment will be fundamentally changed, and the amount of work that will go on will be of major impact. So the community, I'll better get onto this really, the community is responding, and I think we have a good chance of rebutting it, because it's a flimsy case, and it is primarily driven by people who want to kind of make something out of it. Anything that's got this government supporting it has to be considered a bit dodgy. So I would say, if you happen to live in northwest Leeds and you care about retaining the character of the place that you live in, I'd say get on over to the website link I'm going to put below, and find out how you can make complaints about this, make representations, because we're determined to make it go to public inquiry. It is far too big an issue simply to be passed through the normal planning process, which is slack enough as it is. And I think we need to put this into the context of what you might call the global fight back, because the corporatist, industrialist elites are determined to continue pressing their agendas on people, on the ordinary working people who live in the streets near to these roads that they are going to turn into huge nightmares. And these are the kind of people who make up our communities. It's you and me, folks. They're not going to be putting the this enlarged road. They're not going to be setting back conservation stone walls in front of their houses. They'll be their own houses. The people who are planning this, they live places far away from where this is going to impact people. It's not for the benefit of local people, it's for the benefit of people outside who will be making money from it. So you know what to do, folks. Think about it, find out what you can do, make your objections. Think about how you feel about this, think about how you feel about your place in the world related to a corporate machine, a government machine, there's no difference, which wants to just come into your life and put a bulldozer through it. It's kind of what it amounts to, folks. We have to stand up and stop this kind of thing, because it is tyranny. No other word for it. Sacrificing human people before the bulldozer, metaphorically if not literally. Okay, so I'll be back again tomorrow, and thank you for watching. I say in Lancashire. Good evening. And well, there's a lot of local people who are not keen on this happening for a number of reasons. For myself, primarily it's a mix. Well, primarily it's a mixture of two things. One is the damage to the conservation environment that we would experience here in Headingley if it happened. But also something which is kind of a bit off the map for most people, because as I've talked before, ethics has somehow been written out of equations. You're not allowed to express. Oh, hello everybody, I'm Cosmic Claire and welcome to another one of my evening videos. As if you've seen any of my videos before, you probably know that I have an interest in local environmental concerns, and not all of them are as going as well as Toll for this evening. There's a people who live in Leeds may have heard of this. There's a Trolleybus scheme that they want to. The government is proposing to give some money to Leeds City Council to develop a Trolleybus scheme through from the northwest of Leeds to the southeast, which is kind of one of the principal axes of the city. The rest, the situation with Sparrow Park is fairly optimistic, and you may recall I've mentioned about the problem with the paving stones that the council seem to be taking the slightest opportunity to remove. And this is an ongoing one, but one that I hobbled up to the parish